Good morning, freeze dryers. Welcome back to Live Life Simple. Today we're going to freeze dry one of the best freeze dried snacks there is. I'm going to show you some best practices. I'm going to show you the best storage you can do on these because today we're doing 16 pounds of freeze dried strawberries. Freeze-dried strawberries are always a popular choice. In fact, most people freeze dry strawberries one of their first batches when they first get the freeze dryer. But if you don't know what you're doing, freeze-dried strawberries can be kind of tricky. They can rehydrate very fast. If you live in a humid area or they're exposed to a humid climate or just humidity in the air, they will just swell right back up and turn into a sponge. Freeze-dried strawberries can also be very discouraging if it's your first batch or if it's one of your first batches after getting your freeze dryer, because they take a lot longer than most people are anticipating, and a lot of times they think that their freeze dryer is not working correctly because it does take so long. Freeze-dried strawberries can sometimes take up to twice as long as other foods. So I'm going to show you a couple tricks today that will help you get those to freeze dry faster. You're going to be able to freeze dry them more consistent, and then also storing them can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to help you with that too. So my first tip is you need to get them down to a smaller piece, because really the rule of thumb with freeze drying anything is the smaller you can get something down to, it's going to freeze dry better and faster, and it's also going to store better. And we're going to do that using a food processor. You can obviously process them by hand if you want to. I'm doing a lot of strawberries today, 16 pounds, so to me, it's a lot easier just to run them through the food processor. If your food processor is adjustable, I would probably do about as thin as you can without it being flimsy. So if you hold up the sliced strawberry, you don't want it to kind of sag. If you hold it up, it's not really sagging. This is probably a little thinner than I would normally want it, but this will work just fine. Also, make sure that you soak and rinse these before you run them through the food processor. These growers tend to put a lot of junk on the strawberries, and I just don't want anyone to get sick, and you don't need to be eating that kind of stuff anyway. You can take the tops off. I don't. I actually leave them on because once they're freeze dried, it's just extra greens, and to me, I don't ever taste it, so I always leave them on. You can take them off, whatever your preference is. This will actually be a first for me. I have not ever used my XL for freeze drying strawberries. That's why I bought so many. What I'm thinking though is 16 pounds may not even fill my XL trays. My XL only has 6 trays. I do have an older XL when I got them when they first came out. But we'll see how far they go. I have about 2.5 pounds to 3 pounds on this tray. And what I did is just, instead of laying them individually, I just kind of took my hand and spread them like this. So if you do lay them individually down, they will freeze dry a lot faster. If you do them this way, I would definitely keep an eye on them after the cycle says it's done, just to make sure. I would test each individual area as you go along and just to make sure that they are done. I'm going on to pre-cut parchment onto the tray. I like being able to just peel it off, and you can also fold it. You can dump it into things once it's done. It makes it a lot easier. If you're a more experienced freeze dryer and you're comfortable with whether or not something is done, another tip that you can do is take a second sheet of parchment paper, lay it over that first, and you can actually do a second sheet of freeze-dried strawberries, or really any kind of fruit will work that way. This will obviously add extra time to your freeze-drying cycle, so keep that in mind. And then I'm going to add some tray stackers so we can get started on our second tray all the way up to 6. I'm actually not going to pre-freeze today because the XL trays are so big that it's really hard to find a deep freeze or a freezer that will fit these trays. So I'm not pre-freezing. Fruit, especially strawberries, will definitely benefit from pre-freezing, as really all of freeze-dried food does, in my opinion. And because I'm not pre-freezing today, I'm gonna go ahead and start my machine so it has time to cool down. All right, that was a lot of work. The best thing about the XL freeze dryer is it does a lot of food. The worst thing about the XL freeze dryer is it does a lot of food, and it's a lot of work to get it ready. But we are ready now. I ended up using about 2.5 pounds to 3 pounds on each of these trays. I would rather just have a shorter cycle time and have it done, and maybe have to add just a little bit of dry time as opposed to keep doing it over and over again to find the soft spots. But anyway, let's get these in. My bottom tray was a little sparse, so I'm gonna put that on the bottom shelf rack. Lots of strawberries. Take a minute to subscribe to Live Life Simple if you have not already, if you're interested in freeze drying, or if you are even an experienced freeze dryer. And while you're subscribing, click the bell that's right next to the subscribe button, and then you'll get notifications every time we put a new video out. That's Sundays at 8 a.m. And if you like the content that we're putting out there, let us know by giving us a thumbs up. If you'd like to get this recipe, as well as more than 300 recipes, you can join the freezedryingcookbook.com. Otherwise, we also have a hard copy version of our cookbooks, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And you can accompany those with the Freeze Drying Handbook, which is a handbook that I wrote for freeze dryers. And you can also join our social media groups. They're Retired at 40's Freeze Drying Group, found on Facebook and found on MeWe. Any of the freeze drying accessories we use on today's video and all of our other videos are from freezedryingsupplies.com. We develop those products. We just really want to streamline the entire process, especially when you're freeze drying large amounts with XL like this today. We're using Harvest Right freeze dryers. We've used them for lots and lots of years. And if you are curious about Harvest Rights and you want to see their specs and pricing and all that kind of stuff, visit down in the description. You can use our affiliate link. That greatly helps out this channel. It helps us do giveaways, and it helps us develop new products. It also helps this channel keep these videos coming out and keeps us up with the newest in freeze drying. Now we'll let our freeze dryer freeze dry our 16 pounds of strawberries, and I will see you in a second. Well, mine took about 30 hours. I probably did a little more time than I needed to. A good indicator for whether or not it's done is just feel the bottom. You want the bottom of your trays to be warm when they're done. And those look absolutely beautiful. And because of our parchment, we can just peel these all up. And then once we get them up, you can break them up, and that way they're all gonna pull apart from each other. So if you have a food funnel, you can actually take this whole sheet and just bend it like this and get it dumped all into a bag. And these will kind of separate as they go down the funnel. And then I kind of just crumble them up. They'll separate pretty well. They'll stay a little chunky, but they'll stay in still big chunks when they go into the bag. This kind of stuff is what makes me love my freeze dryer, because if you bought this just a little bit at Trader Joe's or somewhere like that, they charge so much for stuff like this. And if you have a freeze dryer any size, you can freeze tens of pounds of strawberries at a time. Make sure that if you're vacuum sealing this, you don't really want to vacuum at all. I would probably just seal this, or all of these will just get crushed into a powder or smaller chunks. Let's go take a taste test. So the takeaways for freeze-dried strawberries: make sure that you process them down to a small enough piece that they will get all the way freeze-dried. You want to double and triple check that these are all the way freeze-dried. You want them to be crispy when they're done. You don't have to remove the greens. In fact, to me, you can't even taste them, and it's just a bonus amount of greens to eat. I hope you found today's video helpful and informative. Happy freeze drying, and remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.